representative of the government of Karnataka in the GST Council. Mr. Gowda, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. As I pointed out, whether it's the Hotel Owners Association, it's South India, it's the textile lobby, it's the gold lobby, it's the biscuit lobby, there's a lot of people who are queuing up outside of government asking for a review of the rates that have already been announced and asking the government to take into consideration their points of view before rates are arrived at for the 6 categories that will be taken up on the 3rd of June. Is there any room, any flexibility within the GST Council to review the rates that have already been fixed?
At this point, if you reopen what has already been decided, it would become very difficult to move forward. Even in Karnataka, many trade representatives have reached out to us and they have impressed upon us the specific concerns of respective sectors. And I am also very convinced by the representations that they have made. But if we start reopening, then in some sense, one, we would not be able to conclude business because it becomes an ongoing process. And number two, whom do you pick and choose between? Then it would amount to yielding to certain lobbies. So there are both these concerns are there. My sense is that there may not be a lot of scope to reopen what has already been decided. But that's just one opinion. When the council sits, council has got supreme powers. And in its wisdom, if it feels that some issues need to be relooked at, I cannot rule it out.
Okay. You said that several representations have been made to you, and in some cases you feel that the representations are in fact legitimate and the concerns raised are valid. Let me ask you about specific concerns that you feel where perhaps in the wisdom of the GST Council it might make sense to consider the representations made.
Shireen, kindly excuse me, it would not be appropriate for me to publicly sort of air the concerns of a particular industry. I would rather leave it out of public discussion of a sector specific. But automobile sector has reached out to us, IT sector has reached out to us, handicraft sector have reached out to us. So restaurants, hotels, granites, textile sector. So a lot of them have reached out. The point I was trying to make earlier was that, yes, from their point of view, there are concerns that, they have valid concerns. But when you aggregate at the national level, from a state-specific point of view, it seems like a valid concern. But when you aggregate the issues at the national level, you have to stick to certain norms. And the norms that the GST Council has gone by is that they have, by and large, tried to stick to I've told on this show before, I've shared with you, by and large, the rule has been that, okay, what is the combined incidence of taxation of central excise, state VAT, service tax, or any other forms of taxation that exist so far, and then factor in the cascading effect. So all these factored in, by and large, I think 98%, the new rates will comply with the current rate of taxation. And in fact, many commodities are actually coming down. In some cases, the rates are coming down as well. So by and large, I think there would be a positive, implication.
Okay, let me then ask you about what we can expect on the 3rd of June. And one of the big bones of contention is whether the GST Council is in fact going to try and differentiate basis branded or unbranded. Now, I know that, at least CBEC officials believe that that is not necessarily the best way forward, because if you do it for one sector or one industry, it will again open up a Pandora's box. So what is the sense that you get within the GST Council on whether distinctions should be made on rates basis whether something is classified as branded or unbranded?
Shireen, so this is I'm glad you have raised this issue. It gives us an insight into the complex challenges that we face. Now you're talking about, let us say, packaged atta. Anyway, basic cereals will be exempt, right? Now you're talking about semi-processed packaged foods. Now, there are some players in the unorganized sector who want to be left out, right? But there are also players who are in the organized sector who spend enormous amounts on quality, on branding, on advertising. So a lot of them actually would have already incurred a lot of input tax on their inputs. I hope you're getting my point. So the lot of raw material that they buy, for example, they have machinery, they have warehouses, they have a lot of investment, and they buy a lot of other industrial inputs. So all of them, they have actually paid tax on them. So they actually want input tax credit. So if you would do a zero rating of these branded, packaged, semi-processed foods, you would actually be putting them at a disadvantage. So some of these people who have invested on building a brand, on quality standards, on establishing their brand across the country, they have advertising input tax credit, they have material input tax credit. So all these, they would actually benefit if they are under a 5% tax category. But there are those in the unorganized sector who may not have accumulated input tax credit, and they are asking for to be left out of the entire rating system. So we need to address the concerns of both. And one proposal, it is still a proposal, let me be clear, I have not taken a position, the council has not taken a position on this, is to differentiate, can we have a 5% rate for branded and then leave the unbranded ones out, so that both the concerns are actually met. Yes, during the enforcement phase, this will open up implementation challenges, but we will have to see if we do agree to this proposal, can we come up with an effective implementation mechanism? So this issue actually shows you how complicated and challenging the task is.
I don't doubt that at all, sir. I understand that this is a complex issue, but is the 5% proposal only pertaining to packaged foods, or is this the case across the board? It could be the case even as far as textiles, for instance, is concerned, or footwear even.
No, I'm primarily talking about packaged foods issue. Where things like, for example, atta, particularly, whether branded atta should be taxed or not taxed. So that was the semi-processed foods. So that was the issue I was talking about. But of course, footwear is an altogether different, very challenging, very complex sector. But that requires a different treatment.
So what is the thinking there as far as footwear is concerned? Because, the view of several finance ministers, including the Delhi finance minister, is that you must keep this as low as possible. Industry, at least the formal sector, believes that a 12% rate is appropriate. So again, are we going to see these distinctions being made even within the footwear business? Is there a separate proposal on how to treat branded, unbranded, even within the footwear space?
So I would not like to, presume the decision of the council, but the general debates are between, what should be the rate below which the footwear should be exempt from taxation, and at what rate should the taxation begin. Should we make a distinction between branded and unbranded, and should we also have a separate category for leather footwear? So these are some of the issues that were briefly touched upon in the previous council meeting but have been deferred to the next council meeting. So this is the nature of issues related to footwear. What should be the cutoff under which footwear will not be taxed, and whether should we go by branded, non-branded, or should we go by something like leather? These are some of the issues before the council.
The other contentious issue, and that has to do with gold, sir. My understanding is that the sense of the GST Council is that, 5% may be too high, which was the recommendation made by the Subramaniam Committee of anywhere between 4 and 6%. It could perhaps finally fall into somewhere between 2 and 3%. Would that be an accurate assumption to make on the basis of whatever little conversation has happened? And I understand that this hasn't been taken up in detail by the council yet. It will be taken up on the 3rd of June.
Correct. Shireen, see, various states and stakeholders have different points of view on the rate of taxation on gold ought to be. Yes, some have proposed 3, some have proposed 4, and some have proposed 5. People have asked why shouldn't gold be at a higher rate, because yes, there is a widespread consumption of gold, but it's still a privileged material. It's not a common consumption material. So gold is an issue which is consumed by a lot of people, though it's a very precious one, but it's a precious and luxury item nevertheless. So somewhere, people have proposed a higher rate. Then there have been concerns that if the rate goes higher, then the compliance may come down, and that may lead to revenue loss and avoidance of taxation, which is what we are trying to prevent. So these are the concerns. I think the debate in the next council will revolve around what is an optimum rate at which we can ensure greater compliance, and at the same time also ensure that gold gets a decent taxation.
My final question, I know we'll probably get more details when we meet you after the meeting on the 3rd of June, sir. But my final question, is 1st of July cast in stone now on the basis of the feedback that you're getting from industry in terms of preparedness, in terms of the IT systems preparedness? Do you believe that the 1st of July is cast in stone as far as the rollout date is concerned?
We had an interactive meeting in Bangalore today. The Revenue Secretary, Government of India, was also here.
Yeah.
And, it was an open forum where the trade and industry representatives were given a free chance to ask any clarification questions. And there were quite a few clarifications and questions that were raised by the industry representatives. But by and large, the broader aspects are in place. So there were clarifications sought on some of the finer points and nuances. So I think there is one full month to clarify any finer points that might be plaguing the industry representatives. So this 1 month gives us enough time to get it going from July 1st. I'm confident we can roll it out on July 1st.
All right, so we'll speak with you again on the 3rd of June. But for today, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18 and clarifying some of the doubts that we have. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, Shireen, thanks for joining in with that. Time for a very short break, but up next, the Southwest monsoon hits the south.